Welcome back to the GCN Tech Clinic, where we aim to answer your bike and tech-related questions. And you can submit your questions, as ever, using the hashtag AskGCNTech down in the comment section below and on social media as well. And I'll aim to answer as many of them as I can. So first up this week, let's get straight into it, is a question from Tom Ransom Jones, who commented under last week's Tech Clinic, saying he just watched the video on how to set up hydraulic disc brakes, and he's thinking about upgrading his mechanical disc brakes on his Cannondale Synapse to 105 hydraulic disc brakes. But he doesn't want to change the entire group set, obviously, save a bit of money. What are the minimum parts that you need to upgrade? Well, first you're going to need hydraulic shifters. This is because the hydraulic shifters have hydraulic reservoirs and components in them that are necessary for hydraulics, whereas not cable ones. So you need those. You're also going to need corresponding hydraulic disc brake calipers. You should be able to keep your same rotors if they're not worn out. If they're sort of Shimano compatible, they should work. So you should be able to keep those, and then once they change, you can always upgrade those as well. And you're also going to need lines that go into them. I'd also recommend that you get new outers for your gear cables and new gear cables as well. They don't cost a lot of money, but you're going to have to take your shifters out and take your cables off as well, so you might as well put new ones in. You'll be able to keep your derailleurs, they'll all work fine. Chain set, all that sort of stuff, all work fine. And then you also ask us a question about anything you should be aware of that's going to cause you issues further down the line, like if you want to upgrade your handlebars. Well, the main thing is that when you put in your hydraulic lines and you install them onto your new bike, if you've got fancy handlebars where the hydraulic lines go inside the handlebar and are routed internally, that can be then a bit of a faff. Like if you change your handlebars, you basically have to disconnect the hydraulic lines and re-bleed the system, which can take a while. It's much easier if you've got sort of less expensive handlebars where the cables are routed on the outside of the handlebar and then just under your bar tape. So you just take your bar tape off, undo your shifters using the Allen key, and then you dangle them, put your new bars on, connect your shifters back on and hide the cables back under the bar tape. It's really easy to do that. So yeah, swapping bars is pretty easy. The only thing is if you're changing for a different width bar, try and potentially factor that into the amount of cable that you leave. You know, if you go to a wider bar, for example, your cables of your hydraulic lines might not quite be long enough if you've not just left a little bit extra. So yeah, that's the other thing to consider. Next question is from Always Breaking Down, who said, "Hi, I recently just got into indoor training." That's good to hear. "How often should I clean and lube the chain of my indoor training setup?" It's a dedicated indoor setup. Well, if it's dedicated, then it should stay clean a really long time. And the answer, broadly speaking, is hardly ever. One thing you can do is just listen to it. And if it starts to get really noisy, your drivetrain, then noise is usually a sign of increased friction and that you're going to require some lubrication on there. Lube will wear out over time, so periodically you can give it a clean and re-lube it. But I would look at if it's starting to look really dirty or it's starting to get really noisy, re-lube it. Also, waxers are the best kind of lube to use on an indoor setup because there's no danger of it raining indoors and washing that off, and waxers are generally a little bit faster, so a little bit more efficient, save you some watts. Next question is from Edward Nunn, who says, "I've got 3 or 4K to spend," nice budget that, "on a bike, and I'm looking to start competing in some duathlons as well as enjoying Sunday rides. Should I be looking at a TT bike over a standard road bike, or Aero bike's a good mixture of speed and comfort?" Well, this is a great question and one that a lot of people ask. And I would say if you're only going to buy one bike, if it were me, I would get the one that's going to give me the most enjoyment and the most fun. And in a duathlon environment, if it's a non-drafting event, then yes, a dedicated TT bike is going to give you more performance and make you a little bit faster, a few minutes on a duathlon course. But riding the rest of the time, I personally find it a lot more fun to ride a normal road bike, certainly a lot more sociable. You can't be very sociable on tri-bars. It's not really not good etiquette to ride a TT bike on a group ride because they're considered to be not as safe. And also just, riding around lanes, they're not as fun. You generally, when you ride a TT bike, you want nice sort of TT bike roads that are not very windy and sort of technical and stuff. So it limits you a bit there, and they're not fun to climb on either. So for all round use, a road bike has the edge. But it comes down to, you have to work out what you want. And if you're really all about the performance of performing as fast as you can in a duathlon, and you really want to, that extra sort of, couple of minutes faster on the bike split really is important to you, then a TT bike, if you're only going to have one bike, probably is the way to go. And that's also because you're going to want to be riding it and training on it as much as possible to get used to the position. So hope that helps. But there are, as a halfway house, you're right, some aero bikes that are pretty useful. And you could also consider just getting a road bike and then sticking clip-on tri-bars on it as well, which is a very popular option for people just sort of starting out in multi-sport events, triathlons and duathlons. So yeah, let us know how you get on. Next question is from James Whitty, or Wheat. I'm not sure if I've pronounced your name correctly there, who says, you've had several videos lately stating that aero is more important than weight when it comes to climbing. In stage 20 of the Tour de France, most of the competitors started on a time trial bike, but then switched to a lighter bike at the base of a climb. The change of bikes cost them some time, so why did they do it? Well, that is a very good question, and there's a lot of factors that come into play here. So a lot of the teams, the more scientifically minded teams, will of course modeled this and done maths and worked out what the weight penalty was of the time trial bike on the climb versus the climbing bike. But also you have to factor in physiology into this. So certain riders are very good at putting the power out on a TT bike. And that's why we saw Tom Dumoulin not do a bike change. He's a dedicated time trial specialist, former time trial world champion, very comfortable at putting the power out in a TT bike. And so he didn't swap. And I suspect had Rowan Dennis been there as well, he also wouldn't have swapped. Other riders, and myself included in this, I've done a lot of time trials, obviously not as a pro, but my power output on a time trial bike has always been lower than what I can do on a road bike. And so when you factor that physiologically into the equation, by doing the bike change, they might also be able to get more power out on the climb as well as being on a lighter bike, at which point a bike change can make more sense. Now, when we say, the other thing I need to clarify with your question is that when you say lightweight is less important than aero, to a point, within the differences of, say, an aero wheel set and a lightweight wheel set, as long as you maintain momentum, yes, in most cases, the aero wheel set will offset the time penalty of having to do a bike change. But the difference between a TT bike and a lightweight climbing bike that's 6.8 kilos can be quite significant. It can be, upwards of 2 kilograms. And ultimately, weight does make more difference than aero on a climb when the weight difference is sufficient enough. It's just usually when we talk about it in terms of, an aero bike versus a lightweight bike, the weight difference isn't that much. And so aero does make a lot of difference, especially at the speeds that the pros are traveling at. But to answer your question succinctly, it comes down to an individual basis based on physiology, the weight difference of that team's particular equipment, and also that rider's particular sort of riding style and preference and strategy for the race. There you go. The next question is from Nick Harkman, who says, I've seen Adam Hansen talking in videos that he's now working with other pros on having his Hanseno shoes available. Have you seen anyone using these shoes this year, apart from Adam Hansen himself, of course? So for those of you who are unfamiliar with Adam Hansen shoes, these are custom molded carbon fiber slippers that go on the foot. They're really light, they're like the lightest shoes available. They look incredible. And we've seen Adam wearing them. But one of the rules that the UCI imposes is that any kit the pros use has to be commercially available. And so you can actually go on Adam Hansen's website and buy them, but they're never in stock. So they are kind of like technically commercially available, but unfortunately never in stock, or there's a massive long waiting list, so you can never actually get them, or they're prohibitively expensive. So there you go. So read into that what you will. And to answer your question, no, I've not seen anyone else using them, but I have seen British Cycling using their own kind of version of that shoe, and we're likely to probably see those at the Olympics. They used them in the last Olympics as well. So really light, really stiff custom shoes for the track. Pretty cool. Matthew Gibbs says, hi, I'm visually impaired and I'm on the hunt for a bike computer. I currently use my phone for navigation as the verbal readout, so super useful and much safer for me. Do you know of any bike computers that offer similar functionality? I know my Garmin watch does lap readouts via Bluetooth through my phone speaker. Well, I use this Wahoo Roam, and this has a massive screen on it, and you can also, there's the zoom buttons, so you can zoom it into a single metric, so whether that's like power or speed, and have it super big on your screen. So I don't know the exact details of your visual impairment, but this has a big screen, it's really clear, and you can make metrics appear really large. But if you do want something that is audio, there are a few solutions out there. I do know that Oakley brought out a pair of glasses that had like a GPS thing built into them with speakers. I think they were Oakley Radar Pace. I don't know if they still make them, but they did also give you sort of metrics as you went along. And we have seen quite a few smart glasses along those veins, but none of them have ever really taken off as a product. So I'm not entirely sure of what the best solution is there, and it sounds like there could be a niche to be filled in that regard. Next question is from Bradley Smith. Hi Ollie, looking to get a dual-sided power meter for my bike. Currently looking at a Giant Power Pro or Pioneer. What would you recommend? Well, there's lots of power meters out there, and kind of the best power meter for you depends on a lot of factors, but I think dual-sided, if you can afford them, are always better than single-sided. They're certainly more accurate, and there is a school of thought that single-sided power meters can lead to a single leg discrepancy because your brain subconsciously learns to push harder on the leg that's measuring the power to get a better score when you look at your power readout. So yeah, I'm a big fan of dual-sided, but there's lots of good ones out there. I would say try and find what is going to fit your bike and your bottom bracket for the least amount of hassle, and then also what you can get a good deal on as well. It's probably the way that I would go about it. But yeah, there's a lot of good ones out there. Al Francis, is it okay to use brake housing cable for cable shifters? And what could possibly go wrong if I try to bodge it? Right. So this question, bit of a sort of can of worms, I guess, but I would highly recommend that you don't do this. And this is for several reasons. This is because brake cable outer and gear shift outer are they might look the same kind of on the outside, but they're constructed in completely different ways because they have very different purposes. So brake cable outer is a flat, well, you've got the plastic outer which just protects it from the elements on both cables and stops them rusting and corroding and things. But then on the inside, you've actually got a flat piece of steel that's then wound into a coil, and this is much stronger than gear cable outer, and the forces that go through a brake cable are stronger, like they're higher forces. And if you were to use a brake cable inside gear cable outer, what can happen is that is dangerous, and the outer isn't strong enough and it can actually rupture because it doesn't have this flat steel coil holding it tight in place. The basic advice is absolutely 100% never use a shifting cable outer for your brake cables. It's dangerous. And don't use a brake cable outer for your shifting because it'll result in crap shifting. So the moral of the story, just get the right outers that you require for the job. It's more hassle than it's worth to try and bodge it. So yeah, don't do it is my advice. And I hope that answers your question. And unfortunately, that's all we've got time for this week. So if I've not been able to answer your question this week, I'm sorry, but keep them coming in and I'll aim to answer it in one of the future tech clinics. So use the hashtag #AskGCNTech, comment section down below. And until the next vid, have a good one. I'll see you later. Oh, and if you'd like to get your hands on some fancy, nice GCN merch, shop.Global Cycling Network.